Commander Jake Morrison rubbed his tired eyes as he stared at the endless void of space through the bridge windows of the ESS Harbinger. 3 years had passed since Earth built its first real starship, and humanity still felt like children playing with toys they barely understood. The other alien races in the galaxy made sure they knew it too. Jake remembered the day Earth tried to join the Galactic Council. He was just a lieutenant then, standing behind Admiral Hudson as they presented humanity's case to the towering alien beings. The Zephyrians with their golden skin had laughed. The insect-like Vex-High had clicked their mandibles in disgust. The peaceful ethereals had simply shaken their heads. Primitive barbarians, they called humans. Too violent, too dangerous. Not ready for civilized space. That was 10 years ago. Earth had been trying to prove them wrong ever since, but the galaxy's doors remained closed. Humanity was alone among the stars, building their small fleet in secret, wondering if they would ever be good enough for the advanced civilizations that ruled the cosmos. The communication officer, Lieutenant Sarah Kim, suddenly straightened at her station. Her face went pale as she pressed her earpiece tighter against her ear. "Commander Morrison, you need to hear this." Jake walked over to her station. Sarah's hands were shaking as she worked her controls. "It's a galaxy-wide transmission, sir. Emergency frequency. It's coming from everywhere at once." "Put it on speakers," Jake ordered. The bridge filled with static, then voices. Not human voices, but the translated words of dozens of alien species all speaking at once. The universal translator worked hard to make sense of the chaos, but the message was clear enough. "Help us, please, anyone who can hear this, help us. The Devourers have returned. They consume everything. Entire star systems are gone. The Zephyrian Empire has fallen. 3 billion souls, all dead. We cannot stop them. Our weapons do nothing. Our fleets are destroyed." Jake felt his blood turn cold. The Devourers were myths, stories told by the oldest races about ancient destroyers that had once terrorized the galaxy. Legend said they were crystalline beings that fed on the life force of entire civilizations, growing stronger with each world they consumed. The desperate voices continued. "If anyone can hear this, please respond. We are sending coordinates. The Kepler station is our last major stronghold. We have maybe weeks before they reach the core worlds." Then came a voice that Jake recognized. High Counselor Vex-High, the same insectoid being who had dismissed humanity's application to join the galaxy. His proud voice was now broken with fear. "2. Any species capable of warfare, we beg you, come to our aid. All past conflicts are forgiven. All barriers are lifted. We need help. We need anyone who can fight." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Jake stared at the coordinates floating on the main screen. The Kepler station was 3 weeks away, at maximum speed. "Sir?" Sarah asked quietly. "What do we do?" Before Jake could answer, his communication panel blinked with an incoming message from Earth. Admiral Hudson's weathered face appeared on the screen, broadcasting from his office in the Colorado Space Command bunker. "All ship commanders, report to secure channels. Immediately. Emergency Council meeting in 1 hour." The meeting was short and decisive. Earth's 5 starship captains, including Jake, gathered around a holographic table as Admiral Hudson laid out the situation. Captain Lisa Barnes from the ESS Reaper spoke first. "They ignored us for 10 years, called us savages. Now they want our help? The question is, do we give it?" asked Captain Roy Palmer from the ES Thunder. Admiral Hudson was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. "Gentlemen, ladies, we've been trying to prove we belong in their civilized galaxy for a decade. Maybe it's time we show them exactly what kind of monsters Earth can produce." Dr. Amy Carter, Earth's leading expert on alien biology, had been studying the emergency transmission data. She joined the meeting from her laboratory, her face grim. I've analyzed everything we know about the Devourers from the alien databases. They're not just destroyers, they're perfect predators. They've evolved over millions of years to consume advanced civilizations. They learn from each species they destroy, becoming more efficient killers. What's their weakness? Jake asked. Amy shook her head. That's the problem. They don't seem to have one. Every advanced civilization that's faced them has used the same tactics: organized fleets, energy weapons, civilized warfare with rules and honor codes. The Devourers just adapt and overcome. But they've never faced humans, Admiral Hudson said. Quietly, no sir, they haven't, Amy agreed. And that might be our advantage. We're not civilized by galactic standards. We fight dirty. We break rules. We do things that would horrify the peaceful species of the galaxy. Jake thought about humanity's history. Wars that lasted centuries. Weapons designed not just to kill, but to terrorize. Tactics that advanced alien races would consider barbaric. Maybe their primitive nature was exactly what the galaxy needed. The decision was unanimous. Earth would answer the call. Not out of kindness or forgiveness, but to prove once and for all that humanity deserved their place among the stars. Within hours, Earth's entire deep space fleet was preparing for departure. 5 ships, the Harbinger, Reaper, Thunder, Devastator, and Fury. Each one carried humanity's finest soldiers, people who had been trained for the kind of warfare that made alien observers uncomfortable. As Jake prepared his ship for the long journey to Kepler Station, he thought about what they were heading into. The Devourers had destroyed civilizations that were thousands of years more advanced than humanity. They had weapons that could crack planets and defenses that had never been breached, but they had never fought humans. They had never encountered a species that had learned warfare in the crucible of their own world's endless conflicts. They had never faced beings who saw violence not as a last resort, but as a tool to be mastered and used without hesitation. Lieutenant Ben Collins, Jake's tactical officer, approached with the final crew reports. All systems ready, Commander. The crew was asking what we're really heading into. Jake looked out at the stars one more time before giving the order to depart. Tell them we're going to show the galaxy what monsters look like when they're on your side. The 5 human ships left Earth's orbit together, heading toward a war that would either prove humanity's worth or see them destroyed alongside the civilizations that had rejected them. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same. 3 weeks later, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. What Commander Jake Morrison saw through the bridge windows made his blood run cold. The space around Kepler Station was filled with the wreckage of thousands of ships. Massive alien vessels that had once been the pride of the galaxy now drifted as lifeless hulks, their hulls torn open like tin cans. My God, whispered Lieutenant Sarah Kim from her communication station. There must be 10,000 ships out there. Jake had seen plenty of battlefields in his military career, but nothing like this. The destroyed fleet stretched for millions of kilometers in every direction. These weren't just military vessels either. He could see the twisted remains of civilian transports, medical ships, even children's evacuation vessels. The Devourers had made no distinction between combatants and innocents. Commander, we're getting a signal from the station, Sarah reported. It's High Counselor Vex High. He's requesting immediate docking. Jake nodded. Tell him we're coming in. And Sarah, record everything. Earth needs to see what we're dealing with. The Kepler station was a massive structure, built to house representatives from hundreds of different species. As the Harbinger approached the docking bay, Jake could see the damage. Huge sections of the station's outer hull had been melted away, as if something had tried to eat through the metal itself. The docking bay was crowded with refugee ships from across the galaxy. Beings that Jake had only seen in diplomatic photos were now huddled together in fear. Proud Zephyrians sat next to their former enemies, the warrior race of Korthek. The peaceful ethereals floated in their protective suits, their usual calm shattered by terror. Jake met High Counselor Vex High in the station's main conference room. The insectoid being who had once towered over human diplomats now seemed smaller, his golden exoskeleton dulled by exhaustion and fear. His forearms shook as he gestured for Jake to sit. "Commander Morrison," Vex High began, his voice translated by the universal system. "Thank you for coming. I know we have not been welcoming to your species." "That's one way to put it," Jake replied. He kept his voice neutral, but the memory of humanity's rejection still stung. "We were wrong," Vex High continued. "We thought civilization meant moving beyond violence, beyond the crude methods of warfare. We believed that advanced beings could settle all conflicts through diplomacy and reason." The High Counselor activated a holographic display showing the battle recordings. Jake watched in horror as massive crystalline creatures, each the size of a city, tore through the galactic fleet. The alien ships fired their energy weapons, but the beams simply bounced off the Devourer's surfaces or were absorbed entirely. "They appeared 6 months ago," Vex High explained. "First at the edge of Zephyrian space. We thought they were just another hostile species. Our fleets engaged them using standard combat protocols. We gave them chances to surrender, followed the rules of civilized warfare." Jake watched the recordings more carefully. The alien fleets fought with precision and honor, their formations perfect, their attacks coordinated. They even ceased fire when Devourer vessels appeared to be disabled, following galactic law about mercy to defeated enemies. "The Devourers ignored every rule," Vex High continued. "They showed no mercy, took no prisoners. They didn't just destroy our ships, they consumed them. Every piece of technology, every crew member, every bit of data. They learned from each battle, adapted. Their tactics became stronger." Lieutenant Ben Collins had been studying the tactical data. He leaned forward. "Counselor, what happened when you tried different weapons? Kinetic rounds, explosives, anything physical?" Vex High's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Physical weapons?" "Commander, we abandoned such primitive methods millennia ago. Energy weapons are clean, precise, civilized. Why would we use crude projectiles when we have particle beams?" Jake and Ben exchanged glances. Humanity still used kinetic weapons alongside their energy systems, old-fashioned bullets, missiles, and explosives. The galactic community had always mocked these primitive weapons. "Show us everything," Jake said. "Every battle, every encounter. We need to understand what we're fighting." For the next several hours, Jake and his officers reviewed the Devourer's attacks. The pattern was always the same. The crystalline creatures would appear in a system, usually 3 to 5 of them together. They would ignore all attempts at communication and immediately attack anything moved. Their weapons were unlike anything in the galactic databases, streams of pure energy that seemed to dissolve matter at the molecular level. But it wasn't just their weapons that made them terrifying. The Devourers learned from every encounter. They adapted their tactics, improved their defenses, and seemed to anticipate their enemies' moves. Worse, they appeared to feed on the destruction they caused, growing larger and more powerful after each victory. Dr. Amy Carter had been studying biological samples from the destroyed ships. She joined the briefing via hologram from her mobile laboratory aboard the Harbinger. "I've analyzed the residue left behind by the Devourers," she reported. "These aren't just weapons or ships. They're living creatures, but unlike anything we've ever encountered. Their cellular structure is crystalline, but it's alive. They don't just destroy civilizations, they consume them completely. Every piece of technology, every bit of biological matter, every scrap of information becomes part of them." "That explains how they adapt so quickly," Ben observed. "They're literally eating their enemy's knowledge." Amy nodded grimly. "There's something else. The energy signatures from their feeding process suggest they're not just consuming matter and energy. They're consuming something more fundamental. Life force, consciousness, maybe even souls if such things exist. The room fell silent. Jake looked around at the alien faces, seeing the same thought in every expression. How do you fight something that becomes stronger every time it wins? There's more, Amy continued. I've been analyzing the psychological profiles of the Devourer's victims. Every species they've encountered has been advanced, peaceful, civilized. They've all evolved beyond physical violence, preferring negotiation and energy-based combat. The Devourers seem to be specifically adapted to prey on these types of civilizations. What are you suggesting? Vexhai asked. I'm suggesting they've never encountered a species like humanity, Amy replied. We're not peaceful. We're not civilized by galactic standards. We still use physical weapons, still fight with brutality and aggression. We might be the one thing they're not prepared for. Jake stood up and walked to the window overlooking the graveyard of ships. Somewhere out there, the Devourers were preparing for their next attack. The last free worlds of the galaxy were counting on 5 human ships to save them. Counselor, Jake said without turning around, you asked for help. You said all barriers were lifted. Does that mean we can fight this war our way? What do you mean? Jake turned back to face the alien leader. I mean no rules, no civilized warfare, no mercy for enemies. We fight like the monsters you always said we were. Vexhai's forearms trembled slightly. Commander, what exactly are you planning? We're going to show the Devourers what happens when they try to consume something that bites back, Jake replied. And we're going to show the galaxy what humans do when someone threatens our pack. The die was cast. Humanity was about to reveal what 3 billion years of evolution on a violent world had created. The galaxy had asked for help, and Earth was sending its monsters to war. The alarm bells screamed across Kepler Station as the sensors detected the incoming threat. 5 massive Devourer ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, their crystalline hulls glowing with absorbed energy from their previous victims. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Harbinger, watching the alien council members panic as they realized their worst fears had come true. All human ships, this is Morrison, Jake spoke into his communication system. The enemy is here. Remember, we don't fight like them. We don't fight for them. We fight like humans. The station's defense coordinator, a tall ethereal named Zephos, floated over to Jake in his protective suit. His voice came through the translator with obvious fear. Commander, our remaining ships are preparing to engage using standard formation. Delta 7, we request that your vessels support our flanks. Jake looked at the tactical display showing the alien battle plan. Perfect formations, organized retreat points, rules of engagement that would give the Devourers every advantage they had learned to exploit. Negative, human ships will engage independently. But Commander, without coordination we cannot achieve victory through proper tactical doctrine. Your proper tactical doctrine got 10,000 ships destroyed, Jake replied coldly. We're going to try something different. Captain Lisa Barnes from the SS Reaper was already moving her ship into position. Her voice crackled over the communication channel. Jake, I've got a firing solution on the lead Devourer. My crew is ready to show these things what a real fight looks like. The Devourers approached the station slowly, confidently. They had done this hundreds of times before. Face a desperate fleet of civilized ships, absorb their energy weapons, consume their technology, and move on to the next system. They had learned to expect the same tactics from every species they encountered. What they got instead was something no galactic civilization had ever attempted. Captain Roy Palmer from the ESS Thunder broke formation first, diving his ship directly at the nearest Devourer at maximum speed. The crystalline creature fired its dissolving energy beam, But Palmer's ship was already rolling, spinning like a bullet as it closed the distance. "Thunder to all ships." Palmer's voice was calm despite his suicidal approach. "Kinetic weapons work." "Repeat, kinetic weapons work. I'm seeing actual damage to their hull structure." The alien fleet commanders watched in horror as Palmer's ship slammed into the Devourer's side, its reinforced hull acting like a massive bullet. The impact created a spider web of cracks across the creature's crystalline surface. For the first time in their ancient existence, the Devourers felt pain. Jake didn't waste the opportunity. "All ships ramming speed. Target their damaged sections. With everything we have." The human fleet scattered like a pack of wolves, each ship attacking from a different angle. They used tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare. Captain Barnes ordered her crew to target the wounded Devourer's damaged areas, pour in kinetic rounds into the cracks Palmer had created. Lieutenant Ben Collins coordinated the Harbinger's weapon systems, firing old-fashioned explosive missiles at the creature's joints and appendages. The Devourers had adapted to absorb energy, but they had never encountered beings primitive enough to still use physical projectiles and chemical explosives. "Their energy absorption doesn't work on kinetic impact," Dr. Amy Carter reported from her analysis station. "They're trying to dissolve our missiles, but the explosions are happening too fast. The physical shock is disrupting their cellular matrix." The lead Devourer, wounded and confused, tried to retreat. It had never encountered prey that fought back so viciously, so unpredictably. But Major Kate Sullivan from the SS Fury wasn't about to let it escape. "This is for every world you destroyed," she said as she piloted her ship directly into the creature's retreat path. Her ship's engines were already overloading, turning her vessel into a guided bomb. The explosion tore through the Devourer's core, and the ancient creature died screaming in frequencies that shattered windows across the station. The remaining alien fleet watched in stunned silence as the first Devourer ever killed in combat dissolved into space dust. The humans had done in minutes what their advanced civilizations couldn't accomplish in months of fighting. But the other 4 Devourers were learning, adapting. They began to change their tactics, spreading out to avoid the humans' ramming attacks. Their hulls started to shift, becoming more flexible to absorb kinetic impacts. "They're adapting to our weapons," Ben warned. "We need to change tactics." Jake smiled grimly. "Then we change tactics. That's what humans do." Corporal Tyler Brooks had been waiting for this moment. He commanded the Harbinger's Marine Battalion, soldiers trained for boarding actions that civilized species considered barbaric. Commander, requesting permission to board enemy vessel. The alien observers couldn't believe what they were hearing. Board a Devourer ship? The idea was insane. No one had ever survived contact with the creature's interior defenses. "Permission granted, Corporal. Show them what human Marines can do." Brooks and his team launched from the Harbinger in armored assault pods, aiming for the damaged section of the nearest Devourer. Their equipment was simple by galactic standards: flamethrowers, explosives, and weapons designed to kill in close quarters. The pods punched through the creature's hull, and Brooks' Marines poured into the crystalline corridors. What they found was beyond the imagination of any civilized being. The Devourer's interior was alive, pulsing with the absorbed essence of thousands of destroyed civilizations. "Command, this is Brooks. We're inside the target. The walls are trying to digest us, but our flame units are working. These things don't like fire." The Marines moved through the creature's body like a virus, burning and destroying everything they touched. They planted explosives in vital areas, targeting what appeared to be nerve centers and processing nodes. The Devourer writhed in agony. As the humans carved their way through its living interior, that other human ships adapted their own tactics. Instead of trying to destroy the Devourers from outside, they began using their ships as delivery systems for boarding parties. Marines equipped with flamethrowers and explosives invaded the creature's bodies, fighting them from within. The Devourers had never encountered anything like this. They were adapted to consume civilizations that fought with energy weapons and followed rules of war. They had no defense against beings that would deliberately enter their bodies and fight them like an infection. Captain Barnes watched as her boarding teams reported success after success. "Jake, we're winning. These things can't adapt fast enough to counter human tactics. We're fighting in ways they've never seen." The battle turned into a slaughter. The humans used every dirty trick in their arsenal: suicide attacks, boarding actions, targeting wounded enemies, and showing no mercy to a retreating foe. They fought like the monsters the galaxy had always said they were. When the last Devourer fell, its crystalline corpse dissolving into cosmic dust, the space around Kepler Station fell silent. The alien fleet commanders stared at their displays in shock. 5 human ships had accomplished what their entire civilization could not. High Counselor Vexhi's voice came over the communication channel, filled with awe and terror. "Commander Morrison, how did you do it? How did you defeat creatures that have destroyed civilizations for millions of years?" Jake looked out at the debris field where the Devourers had died. "We didn't fight them like civilized beings, Counselor. We fought them like humans. We fought them like the monsters you always said we were." The galaxy was learning what humanity had always known. Sometimes the only way to defeat a monster is to become something even worse. News of humanity's victory at Kepler Station spread across the galaxy like wildfire. For the first time in months, the surviving civilizations had hope. The impossible had happened. The Devourers could be killed. But the celebration was short-lived. Long-range sensors detected the main Devourer fleet moving toward the Nexus, the galaxy's capital system where billions of beings lived. Commander Jake Morrison stood in the rebuilt war room aboard Kepler Station, surrounded by alien military leaders who now looked at him with a mixture of respect and fear. The holographic display showed the approaching threat: over 50 Devourer ships, including several massive ones that dwarfed anything they had faced before. "The Queen," whispered General Caxthor, a battle-scarred warrior from the Korthak Empire. "Intelligence suggests their leader is among them. If we can kill her, the entire swarm might collapse." High Counselor Vexhi clicked his mandibles nervously. "Commander Morrison, we have gathered every surviving ship from across the galaxy. 3,000 vessels from 200 different species. Will it be enough?" Jake studied the tactical display. The combined galactic fleet was massive, but he knew numbers alone wouldn't win this fight. The Devourers had been learning from their defeat at Kepler, adapting their tactics to counter human strategies. This would be their final battle, and the enemy would be ready for them. "It's not about how many ships we have," Jake replied. "It's about how we use them. Every species will need to fight like humans now. No rules, no mercy, no civilized warfare." The alien commanders shifted uncomfortably. Species that had spent millennia moving beyond violence were being asked to embrace their darkest instincts. But they had seen what human tactics could accomplish, and they were desperate enough to try anything. Captain Lisa Barnes had been training alien crews in human combat techniques. Her voice came over the communication system from the ESS Reaper. "Jake, the Zephyrian pilots are getting the hang of kamikaze attacks. The Ethereals are having trouble with the concept, but the Korthak warriors are naturals at boarding actions." 3 weeks later, the combined fleet arrived at the Nexus system to find it under siege. The Devourer Queen's massive ship, larger than a moon, was already feeding on the system's innermost planets. Smaller Devourers swarmed around it like parasites, gorging themselves on the life force of entire worlds. Admiral Roy Hudson, who had arrived from Earth with reinforcements, took command of the human fleet. His weathered face appeared on screens throughout the Allied ships. "All vessels, this is Admiral Hudson. Today we end this threat forever. Fight like your worlds depend on it, because they do. The battle began with the largest space engagement in galactic history. 3,000 allied ships against 50 devourers, but the math was deceiving. Each devourer was worth hundreds of normal vessels, and they had been growing stronger with every world they consumed. The human ships led the attack, diving directly into the enemy formation with their signature reckless tactics. But this time, the devourers were ready. They had adapted their hulls to better absorb kinetic impacts and developed new weapons specifically designed to counter boarding parties. Captain Roy Palmer from the ESS Thunder was the first to encounter the devourers' new defenses. His ramming attack, which had worked so well at Kepler, barely scratched the enemy's improved armor. Command, they've hardened their hulls. Physical impacts aren't as effective. Jake watched from the bridge of the Harbinger as the battle unfolded. The devourers were learning faster than expected, countering human tactics almost as quickly as they were deployed. But humanity's greatest strength wasn't any single tactic. It was their ability to adapt and improvise. All ships implement Plan Chaos. Jake ordered. Plan Chaos was something no civilized military would ever attempt. Instead of coordinated attacks, every ship would fight independently, using whatever tactics their crews thought might work. No two ships would use the same approach, making it impossible for the devourers to adapt to a single strategy. The results were spectacular and terrifying. Some ships used their engines to create massive explosions. Others released clouds of metal debris to clog the devourers' feeding mechanisms. Korthak warriors, inspired by human marines, began boarding enemy vessels with primitive melee weapons that the creatures' defenses couldn't absorb or counter. Lieutenant Commander Steve Davis led a particularly brutal boarding action against one of the larger devourers. His mixed human-alien team used flamethrowers, explosives, and even simple steel swords to carve their way through the creature's living interior. The sight of civilized beings fighting with such primitive savagery would have horrified their ancestors, but it was working. Dr. Amy Carter, monitoring the battle from her mobile laboratory, made a crucial discovery. Jake, I'm detecting psychological emanations from the devourers. They're experiencing something they've never felt before: fear. Our chaotic tactics are creating genuine terror in their collective consciousness. The turning point came when Major Kate Sullivan led a suicide squadron directly at the Devourer Queen. Her ships were loaded with every explosive they could carry, turning them into massive bombs. But instead of simply ramming the Queen, they detonated just outside her hull, creating a shockwave that disrupted her feeding process. The Queen, ancient beyond measure, suddenly understood what she was facing. These weren't just another species to be consumed. These humans and their allies were fighting with a level of viciousness that she had never encountered. They were willing to destroy themselves to hurt her, something no rational being would do. Corporal Tyler Brooks led the final assault on the Queen's ship. His boarding teams included volunteers from dozens of species, all armed with human weapons and trained in human tactics. They fought their way through the Queen's defenses like a plague, showing no mercy and taking no prisoners. The Queen tried to communicate, to negotiate, to offer terms. But the humans and their allies had learned that some enemies deserve no mercy. They pressed their attack relentlessly, burning out the Queen's vital systems one by one. When the Queen finally died, her death scream echoed across space and frequencies that shattered the minds of every remaining devourer. The ancient swarm, which had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years, collapsed as their controlling intelligence was destroyed. The aftermath was silence. Thousands of ships drifted in space, their crews staring at the dissolving remains of their greatest enemy. The threat that had consumed entire civilizations was finally gone, but the victory came with a price. The galaxy looked at their human saviors with a new understanding. They had asked for help, and Earth had sent monsters that had saved them all. But monsters nonetheless. In the months that followed, humanity was not just admitted to. the Galactic Council, but given leadership roles in defense and military planning. The other species understood now that in a universe full of unknown threats, having predators on their side was essential for survival. Commander Morrison, now promoted to Admiral, stood on the bridge of his new flagship, looking out at the peaceful stars. The galaxy was safe, but it was forever changed. Humanity had proven their worth not through noble ideals or advanced technology, but through their willingness to become the darkness that fights against darker things when new threats emerged. From the void, as they inevitably would, the galaxy's response was different. Instead of calls for negotiation or civilized warfare, the message was simple: send the humans. Let them do what they do best. The galaxy had cried for help, and Earth had sent monsters. Now those monsters stood guard over 1,000 worlds, ensuring that civilization could sleep safely because rough men and women were willing to do violence on their behalf. The stars belonged to everyone, but they were protected by those who knew that sometimes the only answer to evil is a greater evil that chooses to fight for good.